Chapter 13. PvP.
What did Monokuma mean? Second killing game of Hope's Peak?
She asked Kamakura-kun when the shock had worn off, twisting in her seat to peer into the kitchen where he was. Monokuma had cheerily informed them that the broadcast would begin at 8 a.m. tomorrow before signing off. Air had resumed, but she was definitely not in the mood to watch anime anymore. She'd sat there, numb, as Kamakura-kun nonchalantly got up to do the dishes. How are you supposed to react to something like this? Chiaki couldn't get Kirigiri Gakuenshu's body out of her mind. She'd never seen anyone die right before her eyes. Yes, she'd seen people die in her video games and movies and anime, but those had all been fake. And it was easy to pretend this was fake too, just another TV show. But Kirigiri Gakuenshu had been a real person, someone she'd seen on campus. And Monokuma's words about killing games in the 78th class were buzzing about her head like bite bugs. Kamakura-kun put away the plate he was holding before he answered. Shortly after I met her, Enoshima organized a killing game to show me despair. She brought me to the old school building where she had summoned the student council. Using intimidation tactics and blackmail, she manipulated them into a mass slaughter. All but 2 perished in the initial conflict. One hid and faked falling into a coma, and was murdered by Enoshima's lover sometime later. The other attempted to kill me with a chainsaw. He didn't elaborate on what happened after. He didn't need to. She blurted out the first question that came to mind.
Are you okay?
And wow, that was stupid. Obviously he was, or he wouldn't be standing in front of her. He turned, raising an eyebrow marginally. What a pointless inquiry, except at the very end, my life was never in danger, and I knew nothing of and cared nothing for the other participants. Their deaths had no emotional impact on me. There was no way for the experience to leave mental scars.
Cold as always,
she thought with a wince. Rather than settling her down, his words had only agitated her further. Clutching her cane, she rose and joined him in the kitchen. Without looking, he handed her a plate, and she moved to put it away, hoping keeping busy would alleviate the distinctly unpleasant feeling of ants crawling across her skin. He continued. The steering committee tried to cover the event up by claiming the council had been overseas, but Enoshima used footage of my presence there to pin the blame on me, leaked it to the reserve course, and incited them into the parade. She also used the footage to create her brainwashing video. The first killing game was, essentially, the linchpin for the greater tragedy.
So, this killing game is going to be like that? Some kind of battle royale?
Doubtful. Enoshima is a fickle creature, and the first killing game was very swift. A longer, drawn-out one would carry her message of despair better, so she has likely modified it. Chiaki gave voice to the faint, foolish hope fluttering inside her.
Is there any chance of them being rescued before it starts?
The Future Foundation will attempt one. However, the building was converted into a shelter. It is meant to survive outside attacks. Additionally, Enoshima has likely set up extra defensive measures. I calculate the odds of a rescue succeeding to be almost nil. He paused, turning away from the sink to meet her gaze. The question is, what will you do, Nanami? Should you watch this killing game, you will likely witness events you find emotionally distressing. From a medical standpoint, I do not recommend it, but I will leave the final decision up to you. Her grip on the next plate tightened, and she stalled.
I think I have to watch it. If I need to stop, I will. But I have to know they'll be all right.
Not knowing would be worse than knowing. And she could ask Kamakura-kun to just tell her what happened, but, well, he didn't exactly sugarcoat things. His face was unreadable as he nodded. Very well. Set your alarm early and I will meet you downstairs. The next morning, he had breakfast waiting for her in the living room. Accepting the offered plate of miso soup and eggs, she sat on the couch, nervous butterflies taking flight in her stomach as Kamakura-kun turned the TV on. At 8 o'clock sharp, the broadcast begun, with a brunette boy dozing on a desk. A colorful nameplate flashed on the screen, informing them his name was Naegi Makoto, and he was the ultimate lucky student. "Oh, by the way," Monokuma explained, briefly popping up out of nowhere, "Naegi-kun and his classmates have all had their memories of their time at Hope's Peak taken from them. I hate adhering to a cliché plot device like amnesia, but it was necessary to set the mood, you know? I mean, what good is a murder mystery show if there's no overlying mystery to solve? Boo!" And just like that, he disappeared.
Of course Enoshima has something like that at her disposal.
Chiaki thought grumpily. The antagonists always started with more power than the protagonists, but just once it would have been nice for the opposite to hold true. They watched Naegi-kun sleep for a few more minutes before he jerked awake with a gasp, staring around with wide eyes. He took everything in, the iron-plated windows, the security camera, the childishly scrawled pamphlet on his desk. Confusion crossed his face, and he rubbed his forehead like he was trying to remember something. After a few minutes of holding that pose, the brunette uncertainly made his way to the entrance hall, the broadcast trailing his steps. The rest of his class was hovering there, and Chiaki watched him go around introducing himself. As with Naegi-kun, Enoshima had nameplates appear to inform them of all the students' names and talents, though it was mostly unnecessary. Several of her classmates had been fans of Meizono-san's idol group. She'd heard Kuzuryo-kun grumble about Hagakure-kun's debt more than once. Nirai-kun and Owari-san had talked up a storm about sparring with Ogami-san. Other than Naegi-kun and Kirigiri-san, Chiaki had been peripherally aware of all of Class 78 in some way. When Naegi-kun spoke to Enoshima, the gamer frowned and leaned in, studying the screen with a furrowed brow. There was something off about her. Subtleties in her face that didn't line up with Chiaki's memory of the strawberry blonde. Sure, it had been dark and a while ago, and she might be remembering wrong, but something was off. Naegi-kun seemed to notice it too, for he commented on her not looking like she did on the magazine covers. She laughed and waved it away as special editing, and that seemed to convince the ultimate lucky student. But Chiaki was still uncertain. It was the eyes, she decided. Enoshima's eyes had been piercingly blue, glinting like ice. And this one's weren't. She remembered that clearly.
That girl doesn't seem like Enoshima,
she told Kamakura-kun. You would be correct in that assessment. She waited for him to elaborate. When he did not, she prompted,
So, who is she?
He stared at her. Realization dawned.
You aren't going to tell me, are you?
It will be interesting to see what conclusions you draw, was all he said, and she pouted, turning back to the screen. Trepidation built up in her chest as the intercom came on, Monokuma's discomforting, cheeky voice calling the students to the gym. Chiaki wished she could somehow warn them what was coming, watching them act like it was a joke as they trickled away. Kawada-kun even talked about napping. She bit her lip, hating her helplessness. Monokuma made his entrance, and there was a rather humorous segment of the students' alarmed exclamations. Then he started to lay the rules out for them, and by extent, the audience. Class 78 would be forced to live inside the school for the rest of their lives. No outside communications allowed. And now Chiaki understood why Enoshima had taken their memories, besides wanting a show. Hope's Peak Academy was probably one of the safest places on the planet, if it had been converted into a shelter. Yet the students would think it a prison, since they didn't remember the tragedy. Naturally, they all clamored to leave. And that was when Monokuma dropped the bombshell she'd been dreading. The only way out was to kill. Silence fell. Kill? Nagi-kun finally squeaked, his voice cracking. Beating, stabbing, clubbing, beheading, burning, suffocating, strangling, slaughtering, voodoo cursing. The method doesn't matter. Only a student who kills someone can leave. It's a very simple rule. The most evil of actions leads to the best of outcomes. Monokuma grinned, exposing his sharp teeth. I hope you all can cooperate. All 15 of them seemed frozen by fear and shock. The bear giggled. Boo! This heart-thumping feeling of distress? It's just as if the salmons suddenly started assaulting people. Like I said before, you bastards are often called the world's hope. Making such hope-filled kids kill each other, such a despair-filled situation, my heart is all a thump with excitement. The taunting and mocking continued, until Owada-kun snapped, stormed forward, and grabbed Monokuma by the face. Ignoring his squawk about violence towards the headmaster being against the rules, the delinquent lifted him up in the air. He cursed and yelled, spittle flying out of his mouth as the bear suddenly, eerily, went quiet. Chiaki's eyes widened. She'd played enough video games to recognize that sound.
Oh no.
Kirigiri-san seemed to recognize it too.
It's dangerous. Toss it.
Huh?
Just do it.
Looking baffled, Owada-kun threw Monokuma high in the air. Mere seconds later, the bear exploded into a ripple of fire, sound, and light. Ash and charred bits of metal and fur rained down upon the gaping teenagers. And that was when Class 78 seemed to realize they were not, in fact, being pranked. Another Monokuma popped up and scolded them for trying to break the rules, quashing any hopes they may have had about the danger being passed. That was the end of their resistance. The students were all silent, gray-faced, and stricken as he finished his speech. They wordlessly accepted the electronic student IDs he handed out, and they stood there, staring at each other with apprehension, long after he disappeared.